The idea is somehow to have a kind of way to make the circularity dependency among the action of A and B still present, because here there is no circularity at all. In the first example there was circularity, but no one were able to move because the circularity was just collapsing the dependency in such a way that you couldn't do anything. But still have some guarantees that, well, if something goes wrong, then one can be blamed, or I understand what is really who is culpable, or something like this. Some notion like this. And the idea is just to weaken somehow the dependency, saying, setting in this way. Ellie says, I will pay, but you have to promise that you will ship. So you are relying on some action that probably will happen in the future, so to speak. Not necessarily temporary future, but in a causal future of A. Well, B say exactly the same as is already said for all the example. I will ship after it. And the idea in this case is that this kind of promise is represented in each of the models. We will see in a rather simple way. In the logic, we will introduce something like this arrow with two heads, which is a contract implication we will see later when we will talk about the propositional contract calculus, saying, well, I can do A provided that I will sooner or later have B. So you do something on credit. You don't need to have the antecedent of the implication in this case, and B does as usual. And at the very end, with the theory that the natural deduction that you can have on this logic, you can derive A and B. The same you do in using the even structure style. You introduce a new relation saying A will be, okay, of course I mix it up, it is the other way around. No, it is correct. A will pay on the promise that B will ship the good, and B, well, depends on A. And in the third model, which is PetNet, the idea is that one token can be lent from place P1, and when B is fed again, then this token is given back. And you end up in a net where no marking is negative. We'll come later. So the idea, even here, the dependencies are clear. There are moves, and if B doesn't ship, Alice may complain somehow, because there is some way to do that. And to put, so summing up, we have circularity because the action of Alice and Bob, they do depend on each other, and this is quite clear. The kind of dependency cannot be observed. Well, observed means that I just see the system and I decide what is dependent on that. One move on something which is a promise, and you cannot observe this one just looking at the traces or whatever the system observations are. But in this case, this kind of causality has to be prescribed. You have to say at the very beginning, this is in this way. And what I'm going to do is to show the idea that are really simple. Exploit new kind of arcs in PetNet, new dependent relation in the structure, and you connect it in the logic. And this is just the idea of the whole stuff. Of course, exploiting this idea as the consequence is that well, you have to cast them in a current framework, and you should make them somehow usable. And of course, the logic is that less usable things you have, because just proving always see that it is the logic is still decidable, but the complexity of the decision process is too complicated, because it is basically the same of intuitionistic propositional logic. But with the kind of things like blending paginate or something similar, maybe you can have something more usable. Okay, so we start the other way around. You mentioned logic, even structure, and blending paginate. We do exactly the other way around, but it doesn't matter. The idea is really simple. I mean, what you like to do is to allow places to lend tokens, which are resources allocated there. And the consequence of the theory is that you allow the marking to be negative. And basically that's all. We use it, and we call it lending paginate because we want to have this idea of lending paginate. But in somehow this kind of night has been introduced and used also before. Not really too much, because the idea of having resources, negative marking, is counterintuitive for the modeling of the idea of paginate, where the tokens allocated in a place are just resources. So what does it mean that I don't have any resources? I mean, having no resources is conceivable, but having a negative number of resources is somehow not so well clear. But in verification, many times it is allowed to have intermediate states where you have this kind of something that you can't really understand what it is. And what we do, not in any place, so we use some way to control which places can lend token or not, and to whom. And this is the kind of running example. We have this net where the lending arcs are this one. Okay, the red number, the red one, means that the place P4 and place P2 may lend one token when executing transition T1. Okay. And the idea that if you just look, I mean, this is a net where so you have circularity. The flow is not as cyclic as you may imagine when you talk about causality in paginate. But still, you may say that T1 depends on T2 and T3 because they are producing a token in T2 and P4 respectively. Okay. So T1 can be executed lending token from P2 and P4, and if you execute it, you end in this situation. The red tokens are the tokens which are negatives. Okay, so the marking of P2 and P4 is -1. Okay. Now what you can do is just to execute T2, and you give the token back to P4. So there, in that place, the token is lent, and now that the place has no resources available, but it doesn't matter. The point is that the token which was lent has been given back, and now we can give back also the token to P2, T2, and the rigid marking, now that you have executed T1, T2, and T3, the net entity its work, and the rigid marking is non-negative. So you are in a situation where you don't have any debt, no credit no debt no token to be given back, and you may say that you have executed all the transition you should execute. As I said before, tokens can be lent only from place P4 and P2, and not from any places, which is different from other approaches. Modern logic, for example, Meseguer and Ollier, they use this kind of thing for giving a model of linear logic, and this is we control it in a more precise way, where tokens can be lent from which places. Okay. Each execution of T1 may lend a token from P2 and P4. So if you mark again P0 somehow from the outside or whatsoever, this is a part of a bigger net, then you can execute again the transition T1. Okay. So this is the lending Petri net. These are the dependencies. T1 depends on T2 and T3. T2 depends on T1. T3 depends on T2, and so what you have is that T1 depends on T2 and T3, T2 depends on T1, T3 depends on T2, and T1 depends on T1. You have circularities, okay? And that's all. Not very difficult idea, and even the formalization is quite straightforward. You have the usual ingredients from Petri nets, places, transition, the flow function weight, and the initial marking. For modeling purposes, because this kind of nets we have introduced two model contract nets, which I wouldn't talk today, but which are a part of the idea of using this kind of things to model contracts over internet in such a way that you can put together contracts and be sure that at the very end everyone, a contract is the idea is I will do something in this way provided that I get this other from the other. So it's kind of mutual agreement, and based on the fact that you trust someone that he will do exactly what he is supposed to do. And so the labeling is for this purpose, for making nets interacting with all the other contracts, and we put the labeling on places and transition, and the labeling mapping may be partial, so not every places should be actually labeled. And what we do is we add a lending function connecting transition, places to transition. And of course we require the marking are non-negative, is relaxed, but we are interested only in some kind of markings, namely the one where the marking is non-negative, so you don't have any token to left, and we call it an honor because you reach a state which is somehow safe, or where everyone should be more or less safe. Okay, as I told you, the lending idea, I mean, we, so to speak, we declinate this idea called a lending idea, that there are some other approaches with debit tokens or some other with anti-tokens. Well, the negativity is presented by just adding a new kind of token called a debit or anti-tokens, and somehow the operation of giving back is called annihilation. When you have one token, let's say one token and one anti-token, and you collapse them in nothing. Okay? So formally, lending token is tuple, and of course you have to define the lending preset of the transition and all the places which are connected with the lending arc to this one. We don't draw any kind of arc. We prefer to draw this lending and a normal flow arcs with a pair. And if you don't have any lending arc, we just represent as usual with the number of the weight of the flow arc. And the transition is enabled as usual. There must be enough resources in the places in the standard preset of the transition, but when you file, then you can consume tokens also from the places in the lending preset. Okay, lending token. So the recent marking after executing the transition T's for each place is as the following. Exactly like before, where the red marking, the red tokens for the one consumed from the lending function. Well, I have given that. Okay? The tokens that are used from each places there are the one that are token taking credit, and of course the point is that in the place there are enough tokens that you don't use, that the credit is somehow meaningless to have. Okay, so if you have enough tokens there, you just consume them exactly like the standard procedure. And the point is, once that you introduce a new model, you would like to compare with the other one and a conservative extension of PageNet. If you don't have lending arcs, then it's fine. Still, with the interpretation we adopt, namely, each time that you give back the token you lend to the places, well, you go to something which is much more powerful than PageNet. Now they are doing powerful as inhibitor arcs may be simulated using lending ones. So you have a quite powerful models now. Of course, the usage we make of it is not actually doing these kind of things. So the content we model, everything is still decidable and which is nice, but still PageNet are quite expressive. Then in PageNet are quite good. If you allow to not to repay the debit you have exactly at the same time when you give back the money, so to speak, or you give back the token, then if you allow debit and just debit tokens or anti-tokens and normal tokens to coexist together, then you are not any longer truly powerful. And this is an interesting result made by Stott in the 90s. And that was the idea of lending PageNet. So quite simple, just add these components. Even structure reciprocal causality is again as easy as that. The point is that now you have to say that some events depend on something which has not happened yet. Okay? So the idea is to introduce a relation on events modeling that some events can be done on credit. And just going to the model we had before, the example. E1 depends on the happening of E2 and A3, of course. Now I'm calling them events, so I wrote E1 before I wrote T as for transition. And the point is that E may assume that the two events, E1 may assume that two events, A2 and A3, will eventually happen. And the idea is that, well, you have somehow that E2 depend on, and the other dependencies are exactly the same. E2 depend on E1 and E3 depend on E2. A computation is do E1 on credit, then do E2 after having done E1, and this is standard causality, and then you do E3 after you've done E2. Okay, so this is the whole sequence. E1, E2, and E3 of all events that are causally justified. So what you have is that the idea is that only this whole sequence is a reasonable state of the whole linear structure where each event has a causal justification. Okay? So the ingredients are standard, we have a set of events, a conflict relation, and standard causality, which we do not represent as a partial order, but as is done in general event structure, and events depend on a set of events. And what we do, we add a new relation, modeling the circular causality. And we require that the conflict relation is symmetric and reflexive. You say what are the conflict-free, consistent set of events, which are the conflict-free subset of events, and the two relations, standard causality and singular causality, are just subset of consistency set of events, meaning that it can happen together. There is no conflict between them, so they are different states. And what we do assume that they are saturated. This just for having easier representation of what a configuration is, rather than for mathematical. So to just make the whole definition easier, but it's not necessarily so. But you may have the generating set, minimal set, and then separate them without any problem. This is not a problem. And it should be mentioned, it should be stressed that with this representation we represented the kind of conjunctive causality, which is the standard one, but also disjunctive causality. So we can choose from different set of causes. Not necessarily we have stable event structure, namely that each event is caused by a minimal unique set of events. Okay, so this is the drawing convention. We draw just picking the representation of the logic. We draw the circular causality with a double arrow. Okay, and this means that the E1 depends circularly on E2 and E3. And E2 depends on the 1, and E3 depends on the 2. So the arrow represents the direction of dependency. Okay. And of course, when you have a model, and the key notion of event structure is the one of configuration. All the machinery we have seen is put on work. So the configuration is a subset of events such that each subset is conflict-free. You don't have anything wrong in it, and the execution can be linearized in such a way that each event is causally justified. Basically, call it this secure, and this is just the definition. Okay? And this is why we use separation. And the nice point is that if you look at the family of configurations, so you just look at the algebraic property of the subset of configuration, you have a coherence. So if the least upper bound of subsets is defined, meaning that the least upper bound of a set of configuration is still a configuration, then you have this kind of for each event there is a finite configuration containing it, and the third is coincident freeness, namely that if you take two different events, there should be a configuration that is able to distinguish among the two events. Okay? And now, looking at the configuration in singular causality with the new relation, well, conflict freeness doesn't change. The events in the configuration should be still linearized because you perform one after the other, but you would like to have standard causality, like the one before, for the standard causality. So each event should be causally justified by all the predecessor in this linearization. Whereas for the singular causality, you just say, well, it is enough that the whole configuration justify the happening of this one. So in the future, there may be a causal justification for that. And what you obtain is that, it is still coherent, it is still finite. Coincidence freeness doesn't hold because you may not be able to distinguish exactly between, you don't have for each two different events a configuration saying I'm able to distinguish. Because the configuration are basically the one where you have all the information. Okay? The expressivity is, the conservative extension of unit structure. Just consider that if the relation of circular causality is empty, then you get a unit structure. But somehow if you consider the even structure with this circular causality, then the standard causality is somehow superfluous. You can cover it by the standard one, and this is the idea. Okay, you define you take a quasi-family of configuration. So the configuration that you obtain from an event structure with circular causality, and you define this relation with the hat. So two events are invoked. If one is in a configuration, the other shouldn't be in that configuration. And the circular causality is this one. So you just say that it depends if there is a configuration. You add this kind of prescription for this causality X. But this is the symbol of force E. If there exists a configuration such that E is in this configuration. And this configuration is contained exactly in X union. Okay? And the nice fact is that what you get is an even structure with circular causality where the configuration are precisely the one you started with. So this is, in our opinion, is a nice result that justify that this weaker notion of causality can be used also for modeling standard ones. So the example is this one. This is the configuration is empty, and the circular causality is the one as well. This one does not belong because it requires that E1 is in it, and this is not. Okay. The funny point, the nice point of this is that we can calculating a conflict-free event structure with reachable event, the set of reachable events using standard techniques of fixed points. So define these two operators in this way. Basically what you do is that you start with everything which is causally, standard causality inferred, and then you use that one to calculate the least fixed point of this operator G. And the result is that the reachable event are the greatest fixed point of this operator. And the point of the things we'll see later, another way of calculating the reachable event, of proving that an event is reachable. Here we calculate all the set of reachable events, is that they give an algorithm which is polynomial because it's bounded by the number of events you are using. So if you start with a finite conflict free, then you will end up just calculating on the size of the events you have. Okay. And that is what we have for circular causality for the denotational approach. And now we go to the propositional contract logic, which has been introduced by Massimo Bartoletti and Roberto Zunino in 2010. Okay. The point is, the starting point is the standard implication can be seen as causality, and what you do is, because, well, if you have A implies B, to do B, I must have been done A. If you have intuitionistic, you have this kind of thing. The point is that from the two implications, I implies B and B implies A, you would like to deduce A and B, at least in our setting, because we would like to have something like, say, well, at the very end, I have the two propositional letter, meaning I have done A and I have done B. Remember, Ovelis and Bob has played, and Bob has shipped. Okay. But this is not a theorem in impressionistic propositional logic. So the idea is, because this is a nice account of something as singularity, is to add a new kind of implication, which is a contract. We call it a contract implication because it says something about what we were saying before, about what a contract means. I will do something provided that you will do something. But this provided means that you rely on the fact that someone will do that. Not exactly that it's been done now, but in the interaction you will have these kind of things. And so it is an extension of intuition propositional calculus. But there is no homomorphic encoding into it. So if you try to represent this contract implication as a combination of connectives of the intuitionistic propositional calculus, then you end up with a system which is not sound. And so you don't have anything at all. The syntax is this one, the starting formula, true, false, propositional letters, negation, disjunction, conjunction, implication, standard implication, and contractual implication. And this is the awful, not the awful, it is quite simple, the natural reduction for that. Well, you can see that you can look at the difference between the rule for introducing the standard implication. On the assumption you need A to be able to say the delta deduce A implies B, whereas in the in contract implication you don't need to have anything to like assuming A. which is a kind of weakening, but it's done it is not really weakening because you do not have a hypothesis somehow. Okay? And the classical elimination of the implication of bonus ponens is now the one where you should assume among your hypotheses to have also B. Okay? So it is not enough to have, if you have a contract implication and you have A, it is not enough to have that reduce B, but you need to have some kind of assumption of somehow there B as well. Okay? So this is the idea, and these are some theorems. So this is the binary I'm checking. I co-implies B and B co-implies A. Then you can prove the theorem you are actually interested in, A and B. This is a kind of generalization where you have multi-party, so you justify, you deduce the work conjunction. The contractual implication is stronger with respect to the intuitionistic one, namely, if you have the contractual implication, then you have also the standard one, but the converse is not true. And beside that, PCL is decidable, and that's very nice to have. Okay. In our example, the theory is this one, and of course you can expect it is possible to prove this one. I wouldn't put any derivation of that because it's too big and too complicated. Just a simple theory, which is the one of Ellis and Bob, on the contrary actually. And the proof of A is the following, where you have this identity, and you just assume this on the left and right hand side, and you use the standard, once you have assumed that, then you have this one, because you have that in the theory as well. So you can apply the bonus ponens, and having that one in the theory, then you can use the contractual elimination rule to deduce everything. And now I come to the part where I relate these models. What does it mean? It means that you can use these models in a kind of interchangeable way. So if you have even structure of reciprocal causality and propositional contract logic, you can encode a contractual even structure as a PCL theory, and then use the deductive apparatus of PCL to do something. And one possibility is considered a conflict-free version of a event with circular causality. And before we saw an algorithm to calculate all the reachable events. Reachability means that there exists a configuration such that the events appear on it. And the point is that we have an encoding, which is this one. It's not. It is really simple in the sense that well, the whole theory is that the conjunction of everything, and whenever you have the fact that a set of events standard cause an event, and you have the conjunction of the corresponding prepositional letters implies, standard implies the events, and the same with the circular causality relation. Okay? And what you can prove is that is reachable if the theory represented by the encoding of the Green structure is able to prove that proposition. So we can use the logic to prove reachability. This is, I will just allow me to fly on this one, so I won't explain. There is another encoding which is a bit more complicated for proving something which is more interesting, like being a configuration in a standard conflict event structure with circular causality. Now we don't assume that conflict is an interrelation, and two events are conflict if the conjunction basically implies the bottom. Okay? So it is false that they can be together. Okay? But the encoding is a bit more complicated than this one, so I will explain. And that was for some relation between event structure and circular causality and PCL. Between PCL and Lenin-Petri-Net, the idea is again quite simple. We do for own PCL theory because otherwise stratification makes you can have stratification, but then you have to flatten, and the flattening operation is complicated, so I won't talk about that. But the point is that this can be done in a compositional fashion. So the idea is you have a non-PCL theory, formulas are of the kind X, I should have put implication and contractual implication by mistake, I'm sorry. And the NPN is defined as follows. Okay? Apparently it's quite terroristic, but the idea is really simple. You introduce a transition for each implication you have. Okay? And the idea is that the transition just code what is produced, what is implied, and the set of predecessors, which are the atoms, the propositional letters of the theory. Okay? And then you introduce a number of places. Basically, for each atom, you introduce a place for each transition. Okay? And now, the interesting bit is that you have a landing, so if you have a contractual implication there, then you add a landing arc between the place called A and T, which is the node of the transition. Okay? And that's all. Okay? The other are really standard, so you don't care for for the other, you have this one. Okay? And if you consider this theory, which is the one before, then they are associated and Lenin-Petri-Net P of delta is the following mark. Okay? You have this market tokens, marketplaces, namely saying that the transition A and the transition B may happen only one time. And here you have the unique landing arc, which depends on the fact that A may land a token produced, which will later be used by B. Okay. This is exactly these two marketplaces are there just to ensure that each event, each transition is filed just once. Okay? And this is the whole theory. And the idea is that, first I would say that given a theory of PCL, we can associate the Lenin-Petri-Net, and for a marking we assume to have a pair of the transition that has been executed and the tokens that have been lent, and of course we are interested in having something like I end up with a marking where I have executed all the transition I'm interested in. Quarter of an hour. Okay. and no depth is left. So omega of m should be the empty set. And we have this one. We can relate probability in PCR to the reachability of honored marking in the Petri. But I was saying that the approach is compositional. Okay, the idea is simple. I told you at the very beginning that we are adding some labels on places to be able to compose them. So the idea is to compose net just saying what are the output places of a net and the input places. The output places are the one where you don't consume anything, and the input places are the one where you can consume from them. We don't require that no one can put it in input places and places. So the idea is you can compose these joint nets, maybe the places the position are different, but the levels of course may be in common. You juxtapose the two nets and you connect the transition of one net to the input place of the other net, which have the same labels. And you remove some output places because they are useless in this place. And the operation is quite similar to the one defined on AutoNet, and the nice point is that it's commutative and associative. And this is the formalization. Terroristic we skip it, just go to the example. This is exactly the theory of before A implies B, okay? And this is B co-implies A, so they are the one that these are the output places, and the red one are the output places, and the green one are the input places. You just put together the two nets and you connect. You remove the output places in this case because they are meaningless in the resulting net, and what you have is this net. And of course, these two nets are exactly the one I showed before of the two theories. So this is the one associated to this theory, and this one is the one associated to this PCL theory, and the composition in this one, and well, if you compose, in this case, the operation is exactly, the gives exactly the same thing, but if you compose the nets, then you have a net which has the same traces. For us, is behaviorally equivalent to the one obtained by directly the work composition. And this is a nice result, in our opinion, because after that, what you can do is to build also to let's say, if you have a net representing a theory and you want to refine the theory with another one, then you can still compose it in a nice way and maybe have some kind of compositional verification. This is the result. This one means that the traces are the same. Okay? So I just come summing up what I presented and what are good for. In our opinion, are good for modeling contracts. Where you can describe the contract logically, operational, and denotationally. And the idea of contract is exactly the one we have. Everyone is just saying what we would do in change of what and under which condition. And you put all this data together, that maybe there is a contract broker, and the point is that put together and say, okay, you can interact in this way. And usually this is what is actually done, but the point is that if something goes wrong, then, you are lost. Basically, in the standard approach, nothing can go wrong. Once you have found that everyone should behave in this way, they really should behave in this way. So no misunderstanding is possible. But if you just consider contract as services over the internet, a lot of things may go wrong. They are compositional, contract may be composed, and we have a compositional counterpart on each of the models. We saw, well, for the PCL is quite clear, you just put the conjunction together. For the LPN we have shown, and for the event structure is with subtle but not too much. And you may formalize notion like agreement altogether can fit, compliance, namely all the computation will eventually reach the point of culpability. Someone can be blamed for not having done something, and so you can use this formally for pursue if a coward for such thing exists. And model verification and implementation is available. And we believe that these models are somehow more adherent to reality. You don't have to make a very strong assumption like your implementation are really the proper one. So you can just live in, let's say, not an ideal world, where ideal means close to the reality rather than the opposite. But still, it could be seen as the first step toward this kind of things. Some conclusion, security measures in a way just cut them and make some assumptions that it is done. Usually, or introduce new way to cope with this phenomenon like this one, like the one I presented. Some ideas on the operational approach, then tokens, the operational approach are expressing you need to be accomplished, and then here you can actually, in this event structure, you can express strategies, games, and these kind of things, logically ensuring agreement among various players. And that's all. These are we believe there are clear relations. Some of them have been already investigated, many others have to be discovered, and these are papers on which the talk is based. That's all.
Distributed database systems have been using two-phase commit for a long time to look at circular dependencies. So have you looked at how to prove any of the existing, either the primary, the initial definition of two-phase commit or the variants thereof afterwards? Because it's very hard to do that in formal terms.
I haven't tried. Maybe Massimo has done, but I'm not so sure. I haven't tried to model this thing. So up to now, our is quite ideal. So we are starting to engineering it, setting the volatilities. But you see, the point is that if you want to deduce something in this kind of logic, either or if you want to really use the lending patronage approach and circular data structure, you basically, to prove everything reasonable, you rely on PCL, which is, well, like any logic. If you have something simple, you are able to prove. If you have something really complicated, then you have to find some strategies, and this is not so easy to find.
So the title of this talk is Java Distinguishability, which is an approach to location privacy. However, when I prepared the slides, I realized that maybe it would be interesting to give a little bit of background about privacy in general, to speak about the state of the art. Java Distinguishability is just one particular problem, sorry, location privacy is just one particular problem of privacy. So we first introduce the problem of privacy and information leakage in general, and then we present the mechanisms which have been developed respect privacy. In particular, we speak about the randomized mechanisms, which are the ones which are the most interested in. Then I will speak about a particular problem, a particular approach, which has become very popular in recent years, which is the one called the differential privacy. And then I will present a generalization of this notion, and the geo-indistinguishability approach, which is our approach to location privacy, is essentially based on this generalized, extended kind of differential privacy. So, first, the motivation. Well, I think it's undeniable that privacy is a problem nowadays. It's a big problem. These are just some headlines of some newspapers around the globe that they picked them when they prepared the slides. People are really feeling threatened about not being in control of their private information anymore. And the particular perspective of computer science in this is, it's the problem that we face in security, namely how to control, how to avoid the leakage of secret information in computer systems. And typically in security there are three main way of approaching the problem. The first two are access control and encryption, which are big fields of security. However, they are not always sufficient because there is one general problem of secrecy, that is the leakage of secret information through the information which is available publicly available, which is available by design, as you say. I will give you some example about that. So I will use the technical term from now on to define this public information. The technical term is observable. This notion of observable is rather subtle, depends on the system, depends also on the power of the adversary. And an important point about it is that it can be combined from different sources. And we will see that this is a bigger problem. Now, access control and encryption are not suitable to attack the problem of information leakage, this kind of information leakage, because the correlation is there by design, the public information is there by design, and there is there are ways to retrieve the secret, information about the secret, starting from the observer. Let me give an example of what I mean by observable. So these are three typical examples of information leakage. The first example is the one of the program which checks the password before allowing the access to some device. And the user or the attacker is putting a string, and then if the string is correct, it's the password, then the user can enter, otherwise the access is denied. So even in this very simple program, and even if the encryption of the password is totally secure, there is still a problem of leakage due to the information that the user gets, the adversary gets from the system, namely tries the string, and if it doesn't know the password, but tries anyway to enter some string, then either it guesses correctly, very unlikely, but it might do. And in this case, of course, the secret is leaked entirely, or more likely, it will not guess it, but still it gets an answer from the system that is says denied, and even this little bit of information represents, technically speaking, a leakage, because now the adversary knows that the string he just tried is not the right one, and if you try again, you will have a smaller set of attempts. And of course, this is a very, I mean, if the password is long and then it's an exponential kind of attack, which is not very likely to succeed. But still, from a technical point of view, there is the leakage is not zero. The second example is the result of an election. So here the secret is well, how each user casts his vote. And the problem here is that the public result of the election, which is the percentage of vote which candidates got, already gives us some idea about how each individual has voted, some probabilistic knowledge about the vote of each individual. Of course, if the result is not too skewed, then this information is minimal. But there might be cases in which the result is very skewed. So, for instance, one candidate gets most of the points, the votes. And in this case, of course, you know, you have a very good guess about how each person has voted. So, I like to make here to recall something that happened in my small village in Italy when I was a kid. So there were two main parties back then, Christian Democracy and the Partito Comunista Italiano. One was favored by the church, was religious and therefore favored by the church. The other was considered anti-religious. And what happened, well, my country, my village was not very religious, so almost everybody except one voted for the Partito Comunista Italiano. And so the only vote for the other party was, of course, from the priest, and the priest got very upset because it meant that even his sister voted for the other party, even his helper, all his friends and so on. So it was a big scandal. And, or more realistically, there are serious attacks based on this probabilistic knowledge. For instance, rather one which has been exploited a lot again in Italy is called the Italian attack. And is based on a particular combination of votes for certain candidates that are very unlikely to appear unless one votes explicitly, casts the votes explicitly for them. And in this way you can control how people vote. So the third example there is an even more realistic problem, is the problem of side channel. It is based on the fact that the physical implementation of certain algorithms leaks information about the secret written by the algorithm. So here is, for instance, the problem of decrypting some encrypted password, for instance, or some encrypted information. It's well known that by observing how much time the system takes to try to decrypt the key, you get information about the key itself. And apparently this is a real serious problem in encryption. So, there have been many approaches to reason about information leakage. My favorite ones are the so-called quantitative approaches, the other ones being the approaches which essentially say yes or no, whether there is leakage or not. The reason why I prefer quantitative approaches is because it's usually impossible to prevent leakage completely. So therefore, we have to reason, the notion of leakage must be quantitative. We have to reason about the amount of information being leaked. And this is usually related to the probability that the adversary discovers the secret. Another reason for preferring the quantitative approach is that nowadays the best methods to prevent leakage is collect information are based on randomization. Randomization which helps to obfuscate the correlation, the link between secret and observable. And therefore, the correlation itself has a probabilistic nature, therefore is quantitative. Now, one particular, there have been several notions of leakage that have been developed in the literature, and there is no particular one which has to be preferred in the sense that the notion is relative to the system, to the adversary, and so on. And in particular, one important choice is whether we want to consider the worst case or the average case. Now, it really depends on the kind of system and also the kind of people who want to use this notion. For instance, if it is an individual, he might prefer the worst case notion. The individual is essentially worried about whether he gets in trouble or not whether the population in general is in trouble or not. Whereas an average notion might be more suitable for companies, for instance, because the notion of profit for a company results from an average between average costs and average expenses. So now in this talk I will focus on the worst case problem. So I take the point of view of the individual, which is usually involved within by privacy. More specifically, I will focus on differential privacy and on the related notion of geodistribution. Now, differential privacy. Have you heard about this notion yet? Anybody knows or has heard this sort of buzzword? You heard it? So it's very famous nowadays. And it's quite recent. It was introduced by Cynthia Work in 2006, back at the school at Harvard. And she essentially was interested in solving the problem of privacy in statistical databases. The problem is that, so we have databases that are useful for doing some studies, for instance, and so we want to get the statistical information about them. The statistical information and the information about all the population. But the important point is that we should not violate the privacy of the individual people participating in the database, otherwise people will not participate. And now the problem is not so easy, because even if we are all interested in aggregate information, it's not so easy to prevent the statistical information, the aggregate information, to leak information about the private individual. So here is an example. Suppose that we have a medical database which contains information about the population of individuals, reporting, for instance, their name, their age, and whether they have a certain disease or not. So typically we want to use these databases to study correlation between the disease and other characteristics of the individuals, for instance, the age. So typically we want to ask questions like, what's the average age of the people which have the disease? Now, in this example, I ask a simpler question, namely, what's the minimum age of a person with the disease? The problem is also with the average, but the minimal is easier to explain, so I'll go to this one. So in this case, if you ask what's the minimum age of the person with the disease, the answer will be 40. Okay? So now, this is an aggregate information. We're not saying whether a person has the disease or not. Now, we assume that the person might not want to the idea that whether it has a disease or not. So having the disease as a private information. The age might be public information. Is public information. So the problem is to study the correlation between disease and age, but without revealing, without making possible for an adversary to figure out whether a certain individual has a disease or not. Okay? So here the answer is 40, and now the problem is that, okay, the answer 40 does not say that certain person has the disease, but the adversary might happen to know that, for instance, Don is the only person in the database which has age 40. So therefore, by saying that the minimal age of the person with the disease is 40, the adversary can figure out that the Don has a disease. Right? Is it clear? So, what's the typical solution that was proposed until recently for this problem? There were many approaches proposed, but the most popular one used to be the so-called K-anonymity. K-anonymity means that essentially we try to hide the information of a person by making sure that there is always a group of people, cardinality K, with the same characteristics. So this can be achieved, for instance, adding fake records. So for instance here, to achieve true anonymity, we would add another record, say Carl, which, unless there is already some person present with the same characteristic, we add it. So we add the Carl, which is a fictitious person with the same age as Don, 40. And well, it doesn't matter if it has a disease or not, so fictitious anyway. Now, when the user or the adversary gets the answer 40, now it does not know anymore if it is Carl or Don. It does not know for sure that it's Don. The disease, because there is another person, actually fictitious, but the adversary doesn't know, which could have given the same answer. Because there are two people with age 40 now. Okay? Is it clear? And this is actually a general principle on which most of the deterministic methods are based. So making sure that the correlation between secret and observable is not one-to-one, but rather many-to-one. Namely, for a given observable, there can be many secrets that correspond to it. So this means that when we look at this observable, we do not know if the culprit is any individual in particular among the set that can be observable. And this is really a principle that was used in most all the deterministic methods I know, namely group. It's called in general group anonymity. And some specialized notions are K-anonymity, L-anonymity, and cloaking, that is something used in location privacy. Cloaking essentially is the technique of when you are in a certain location, instead of reporting that particular location, you report an area around it. Instead of saying that I am KITT today, I say that I'm good and slack. Sorry. I haven't learned yet how to pronounce it. So that is the same, really the same principle. Now, what's the problem with the K-anonymity or deterministic method in general? Well, the main problem is that they are not robust under composition of attacks. And let me illustrate the problem with an example. So again, we take the medical database, which is now ensured to be K-anonymous, true anonymous. So the answer to the question about the age would be Carl and Don, would be 40, and therefore single out Carl and Don. But now, suppose that the adversary can ask another query on another, maybe on the same database containing now also the information about weight, for instance. And now the adversary wants to figure out what is asks the question, what's the minimum weight of the person with the disease. So also in this case, the database is too anonymous. In fact, the answer here is 100, and there are two people that could have given that answer, namely Don and Frank. Now, the problem is, if now the adversary combines the two answers got with the two queries, so the first answer gives a pink set of 2, the second answer gives a blue set of 2, but the combination between the two, the intersection between the two, intersection between pink and blue is purple, gives out only one singleton, right? There is only Don which has both, which could have given both, which could have led to both answers. So, and this is a general problem of the deterministic approaches, that by combining the different observations, you can define smaller and smaller intersections, and eventually you might this might lead to single out single individuals or a single point. Is it clear? So what's the remedy to this? Sorry. The first remark. So this is not just some abstract theoretical stuff. Composition attacks are real and they're very dangerous. For instance, well, there have been many attacks based on composition which have been proved, which have been figured out in recent years. In particular, this one by Natarayan and Zmatikov showed that by combining the information of two popular social networks, Twitter and Flickr, one can retrieve the private information about the users in most cases, in 80% of the cases, with only 12% probability of being wrong. So it's really serious, I think. So what's the solution? Well, the solution is to use randomized methods instead of deterministic methods. One possible solution. So the idea is that we introduce some probabilistic noise on the answer, in this particular case of the database, so that the answer to a particular query can also be given, well, essentially that a certain database and a certain query can give different answers with the probability distribution on them. And conversely, when you see an answer, you know that this can be given by different individuals. So, for instance, we could say that when we ask the question, what's the minimum age of the person with the disease, in this particular database, we will get answer 40 with the probability 1/2, but we will get also other answers with the smaller probability, so approximated answers with the smaller probability because we want to have some utility, so we cannot just give an answer whatsoever. We have to give a more probability to the real answer. But then now, when we ask, so this is true for every possible answer. So if the Alice had the disease, for instance, then she would give answer 30 with the probability, say 1/2, but could also give 40 with some smaller probability. So conversely, when we look at the result, when we get the answer 40, we don't know if it is Carlo or Don for sure. It might also be Alice or Bob, or Ellie and Frank, with a smaller probability. So there is not anymore one particular set of individuals, but rather a fuzzy distribution over all individuals of the database. Similarly, for the weight, we can get the same configuration. So some peak of probability of Don and Frank, but with a smaller probability also Alice, Bob, Doug, and Ellie could have given that answer, could have produced that answer. So now when we combine the two queries, yeah, so we get some individual with higher probability than the others, so to the one that has given reason to the answer, but everybody is a little bit purple now. It's not just one set that gets all the purple. The purple is somehow distributed among the database. So in this way, we never get to single out one particular individual. Of course, there is still a problem of composition, right? Because the more and more you compose this attack, the more the probability gets concentrated in one point. But so there is a degradation of privacy anyway. But it's controllable. It's not so dramatic like in the deterministic attacks. And there are methods to control this loss of privacy under composition. So differential privacy is based is essentially randomizing the method, and is based on the idea that when you answer a query, you don't give the exact answer, but you apply a little bit of noise, random noise, and this way of applying noise must satisfy a certain condition, which is expressed by that formula there. Namely, we say that the mechanism provides differential privacy if for all databases X and X prime, which differ for only one individual, say in this case that the adjacent, and for all possible reported answers Z, we have that the probability, the conditional probability that we have got that answer, given that the database is X, does not differ too much from the probability of getting the same reported answer with the database X prime. And this too much is quantified by the fact that the ratio should be not bigger than certain expression depending on epsilon. So the epsilon is a parameter, is the degree of privacy. So this notion has several nice properties. I will explain in a moment what it really means, because if you're not used to probability, if you're not too knowledgeable about probability theory, it may look a little bit abstract, but I will give in a moment another equivalent definition, which is more complete. But this is simpler to express and simpler to work with, and that's why that's the standard presentation of differential privacy. So the nice property about this notion is that, first of all, is robust with respect to the composition of queries. So it is the best known way to control the degradation of privacy under composition. And the second, it does not depend, well, it's actually a property related to the composition problem. It does not depend on the prior knowledge of the adversary. In fact, there is nothing in this formula which speaks about the prior knowledge. So it's a universal definition in a sense. Now, what does it really mean? Okay, so this formula is a bit too difficult to read. Let me explain. So I will call xi the random variable representing the value of the individual I in the database, and x different from I, the random value representing the values of all the other individuals elements in the database. So differential privacy is equivalent to say that the probability that a certain individual has a certain value, the individual I has a certain value, given that I know the value of all the other individuals in the database, is not too different from the probability of the same value for the individual I, given the same knowledge about the other individuals and the knowledge about the reported answer to the query. Okay, so in other words, the reported answer, knowing the result of the query, does not change too much the probability that the adversary attributes to certain the secret of a certain individual. And this is again for every Z, for every reported answer, and for every prior probability distribution. That the adversary, or the side information that the adversary might have. So this I think is a more comprehensible formula, or difficult to formulate. It means essentially that knowing the result of the answer doesn't change much for the adversary about his knowledge about this particular individual. Now, mechanism implementation of differential privacy. Well, the differential privacy has a standard implementation that is based on Laplacian distribution on noise. Namely, these functions here represent the noise that we add to the real query, to the real answer to the query, and the peak is always centered in the real answer, and then the probability of reporting an answer goes down exponentially depending on the distance from the real answer. And whether the curve is more uniform or less uniform depends on the characteristic of the query equal of the sensitivity, namely how much the result of the query can be different depending on two adjacent databases. So this is the formula. It's essentially the formula representing the exponential. So I'm not going into that because of that late. Okay, so this is Laplacian. Now let me spend a word about privacy and utility. So whenever we use a randomizing mechanism, we have to be very careful in calibrating the noise that we add, because if we add too much noise, then the mechanism is going to produce less, in the sense that, for instance, in the case of the database, can forgive an answer independent from the real answer. If I give a uniform distribution the reported answer, then the database becomes useless. So there has to be a trade-off between the utility of the database, of the mechanism, and the privacy, or in general the leakage that the mechanism must produce. However, these two are not the exact opposite of the other, because, for instance, in the case of the database, the utility is between the real answer and the reported answer, whereas the privacy is between the private information, which is represented in the database, and the reported answer. So this trade-off is interesting, and there might be also other differences. So in other domains, we might be interested in notion of utility, which is average, for instance. Actually, also in privacy, also in differential privacy, that's the case. But also one might take into account the private information, the other might not. So they are not exactly the opposite of each other, and therefore there is an interesting question, an interesting research direction about finding the optimal mechanism, namely mechanism that maximizes the utility for a given level of privacy. And how much time do I still have?
You have 20 minutes.
Okay. So I'd like to speak about the two results that I like a lot, I consider fundamental in this field. The first result was presented in a paper by Ghosh and other 3 Indian people in Stock 2009. And there was the finding that the discretized version of the Laplacian mechanism is universally optimal for counting queries. So let me explain. Counting queries are queries of the form how many people in the database have a certain property. And optimal, as I said, means that the mechanism provides the best utility for a given degree of differential privacy. And here, utility is defined as the average gain of the Bayesian user, namely the user which asks the query, but he also has some prior information about the value of the people in the database, or some guess about the distribution. So this is called the prior knowledge. And he gains something from guessing, from figuring out an answer which is as close as possible to the real one. So in the closer the better. Now the average of this gain is called is what we call the utility. Now this result is valid for every gain function. That's a very nice thing, provided that the gain function is a reasonable one, namely the more the answer you guess approximates the real answer, the better. Now the universality here means that the mechanism is optimal for whatever kind of prior you have, so for whatever user. So you have just one mechanism that is the best possible mechanism, no matter the user, no matter the knowledge that the user has. So it's a very powerful result, okay? Which justifies also the reason why Cecil work proposing the Laplacian mechanism. She didn't have this result, but she had the intuition that the Laplacian mechanism is sort of the natural one for privacy. Now, unfortunately, this is true for counting queries, but another 2 people the year after showed that it's not possible for given a universally optimal mechanism for any other kind of query other than the counting queries. Now, it's a bit what I mean by counting queries. Actually, I mean this result is too general, in the sense that what we mean by counting queries are not only the counting queries. The exact formulation of this result is based on a precise characterization of the graph of the reported answers. Namely, we consider the graph in the set of database induced by the adjacency relation, and the query induces the corresponding graph on the set of real answers, so the y and the real answer, meaning that the 2 y's are adjacent if they come from 2 adjacent databases. And now, these 2 people, Brenner and Nissim, showed that the only case in which you can have a universally optimal mechanism is when the induced graph of the set of answers is a linear graph of this kind. So it doesn't have forks, it doesn't have circularities. And this is, in a sense, this is true for counting queries, that you get the linear graph. Also for other kind of queries, but in a sense, the other kind of queries can be reduced to counting queries by scaling, more or less. So anyway, this very interesting result proved that you cannot, the universal mechanism does not exist in general. You have to design, if you want optimality, you have to calibrate it with respect to the user. Every user gets a different optimal mechanism, which is a bit unfortunate. Still, the Laplacian is the most used method because it's easy, it's natural, and it's usually performs well. Okay, and reaching now the last part of the talk, which is the extension of differential privacy to more general domain. So, differential privacy was invented for databases. After it became very, very popular and is nowadays used, there have been many proposals to extend the notion to other domains. But essentially all the proposals are based on the idea that at the end you have a sort of collection of individual information. Our proposal is a different nature, so we extend the differential privacy notion to other kind of application domains by in a more mathematical way. And in particular, we are considering the underlying, we are considering domain for which we have defined the underlying metric. And let me explain what's the idea. So, first of all, let's observe that the mechanism of differential privacy can be reformulated in this way. Two generic databases, not necessarily adjacent, give the same answer with the likelihood that depends on an expression which depends on epsilon and on the ambient distance between them. So dh x prime represents the ambient distance between x and x prime. The ambient distance is databases is essentially the number of individuals in which the two databases differ. And it's clear why this is just the notion of differential privacy, because if you apply to ICDCIT, the notion presented before, you just get the formula. Now, our generalization essentially is very simple. Essentially, we consider a generic space of secrets, x and x prime, not necessarily a database. We assume that there is a notion of distance between these two secrets, and we request. So our definition of privacy requests that the two conditional probabilities of giving the same answer on two different secrets are related by an expression that depends on the distance between the two secrets. Now, what this means essentially is that we protect in this way the accuracy of the information, the accuracy of the secret. And to be more concrete, now we're going to speak of the particular application that we have developed based on this notion, which is the notion of geo-indistinguishability for location-based services. So let me give an example. Suppose that we want to use location-based service to find a restaurant. For instance, we are in a new town and we're hungry and we want to use the smartphone to find a restaurant which is close to our location. Now, we want to do it in a private way. We don't want to reveal our exact location to the servers, the system providing the service, for whatever reason. Maybe I don't want to, maybe I'm in Paris in Portugal and I want they've told my employer that I am visiting a friend Dame, it's not exactly the same thing, so I don't know. Or I am, visiting my lover and going to my husband to find out. So anyway, the people often don't want to reveal where exactly they are, and they don't trust the seconds. So, however, they might be okay with the revealing an approximate location. Gall and Notre Dame are not too far away, so you can say that I am in the zone 5 of Paris. That will be okay. And so we obtain the notion of this notion of joint distinction. It is a way of quantifying the amount of privacy that the mechanism can provide, and it is based on the notion of the privacy that is the extension of differential privacy that I just introduced. It's a particular case in which the secrets is the exact location. The reported location is another point on the map, which we call Z, and D is the distance is the Euclidean distance between the points on the map. Now, the privacy can be reformulated in this way to give better intuition. Essentially means that the confusion I might have between two real locations before knowing the reported location is not too different from the same confusion that I have a priori. So if I don't know whether I am in point X or in X prime, I mean, if these two, for instance, are the same, then after knowing the reported location, these two are still almost the same. Okay? But this almost depends on how far away are X and X prime. So this R is the distance between X and X prime. Or said in other words, if X and X prime are close enough, say Gall and Notre Dame, then after knowing the reported location, they are still close enough. The confusion between these 2 points still remains a confusion, remains unknown. However, if I don't know whether I am in London or in Paris, and I report that I am in zone 5 of Paris, then afterwards I will figure out that I am in Paris and not in London. So this notion means that the knowledge I get about the exact location from the reported location might be it increases with the area in which I am concerned. The way we implement this notion is based on planar Laplacian, so essentially a Laplacian on a plane with 2 coordinates. We have an efficient method to produce the noise, which is based on using polar coordinates. It's really very efficient, as efficient as the linear Laplacian. But when we transfer it we cannot use a polar coordinate for reporting the point, because of course if you use polar coordinate, the center of the polar coordinate is the real location, so it will reveal the real location. So we have to convert it in standard coordinates like latitude and longitude. And we do lose a little bit of precision when we do this. Sorry, we do lose a little bit of privacy when we do this. However, if we use like a double precision, this loss of privacy is completely negligible. Now, very quickly, some evaluation of this mechanism. We have compared our mechanism with respect to our 3 other mechanisms proposed in the literature. We have done the following. We have considered a discrete map of 81 points. And so the comparison is going to be based, of course, not on the, we are going to compare privacy and utility, the trade-off between privacy and utility. Of course, we cannot use as notion of privacy our notion, because that's only satisfied by our, the definition of the privacy is only satisfied by our notion of privacy. So we have to use it instead a notion of privacy which is also very popular in the literature, and it's a privacy defined by Schrocki and other colleagues. It's a very famous paper. He received the prize for the best paper on privacy in 2012. Besides defining an empty notion of privacy and also notion of utility, Schrocki proposed an optimal mechanism for that. So we are now going to compare our notion with respect to the notion with the mechanism proposed by Schrocki under the definition of privacy and utility used by Schrocki. And furthermore, we will compare it with the other two. So the definition of Schrocki is not prior, independent from the prior, but other mechanisms in the literature are. So in particular, the cloaking, which is this idea of simply reporting the area in which I administer at a precise point. And the other mechanism is the optimal mechanism of Schrocki, but evaluated in a different prior. So assuming that we don't know the prior, we can use a standard prior, which is the uniform prior, to compute the mechanism, and then we evaluate with respect to particular situations. So we have considered three different situations. So the purple zone represents the initial guess of the adversary, the prior guess of the adversary. So the adversary guesses that I am either in this zone in the first case. In the second case, he guesses that I am in this zone. In the third case, he guesses I am in this zone. And we assume that the probability within the zone is uniformly distributed. Now we fix the utility. And we want to maximize the privacy for this utility. And as I said before, the utility and the privacy are two notions which were proposed by Schrocki and his colleagues. Now what we get is that our mechanism, which is this one, is worse than the one by Schrocki and Hahn. By definition, the one of Schrocki is optimal with respect to zone notion of the privacy and utility. However, it is better than all the other mechanisms proposed in the literature, which were, like ours, independent from the prior. So again, ours is better than the other ones of similar nature. Is it worse than the one by Schrocki? But on the other hand, the one by Schrocki is designed for a specific user, whereas ours is, for a specific adversary, whereas ours is independent from the adversary. So that's a big advantage, because often you don't know which kind of adversary you are to deal with. Because often you are to deal with many adversaries at the same time. So you would like to have a mechanism which is reasonably and finally, just a bit of publicity, we have developed an application tool for Chrome. Eventually we want to put it on smartphones, which is based on this idea of location guards. Sorry, it's called the location guard, it's based on the principle of joint distinguishability. And the way it works essentially, if we are here in this blue point, and this region, around the region around it is our area of interest, we use the mechanism of the Tanner Laplacian to report an approximate location. So suppose the mechanism will be referring to this one. Then we tell this location to the server, to the service provider, and the service provider will give us the point of interest, the restaurants. Okay, so very quickly, conclusion. So we presented, spoken about the concept of differential privacy. I presented our generalization to artificial network space and the particular application to differential privacy. And as possible research directions, which I think are very interesting, could be to explore other uses of this notion of privacy, which I recall is protecting the precision of the information. And I think that there could be some interesting work to be done in the area, for instance, of smart meters, which similarly might want to have the problem of the signature of electronic devices, which reveals, for instance, they proved that by looking at the consumption of energy, what is the smart meters, you can figure out even what TV program we are looking at. It's really amazing. So an approach like this would confuse the signature and therefore protect the privacy in this sense. Or other fields that could be worth exploring, for instance, would be biological data, privacy-friendly way of reporting biological data. Okay, this concludes my talk. Thank you very much.
So, just to have some closing thoughts, kids will always get smarter. When you see a small child at age, they're very precocious, smart, and all that, because every generation has been making things which are smarter and smarter, including babies. So, no surprise there. Important thing to realize is that tomorrow's systems, tomorrow's things will be smarter than today's things. So we'll all be overtaken by our future generation. Very nice thought. Cost effectiveness, payback period has to be considered. And Mashelkar says this often, and I like this phrase, high tech should be used to achieve low cost. High tech should not mean high cost, but should be used to achieve low cost, like I think we have demonstrated in the case of the smart door. The cost is less than 10% and same effectiveness. And computer science has a major role. So all of you have a lot of work that is waiting to be done. Thorny questions, came up earlier. I think the second speaker in the morning mentioned privacy as something that goes with the smart grid, security, inclusion. So just to complete the story, then we have to sense meaningfully, analyze, respond badly. Those are the questions to ask. And it's not only responding, but also remembering. So remembering phase is a continuous process. Response is to a certain situation. And several remembering phases together contribute to a better response when it has to be done at a certain point in time. So thanks my collaborators. And I just want to leave you with this slide, which shows that almost all of computer science, I can't imagine any aspect of computer science, which doesn't come together with others to make things smarter. Storing is going to work better, I think. That's what people are claiming also at the consumption level, consumption point. So, for example, IIT, we have solar roof panels which are contributing to 1/5 of our total consumption.
That's a different generation altogether. I'm talking about the grid level storage.
Yeah, grid level storage is not being considered at all right now. In the US context, they have grid level storage next to large dams, for example, for water storage at the top of a hill during off-peak times, and using that water to power the turbines during peak hours.
There is a new development also called the liquid metal batteries.
Yeah, those also coming up. Again, that's to me that will keep moving along the timeline set by the researchers. The cost effectiveness of them will be a question for a long time to come.
In India, nothing has been thought about.
There is some work on batteries actually. A lot of people are working on batteries. At the lab level, prototype is being done. Nothing for the deployment of any of those in the real world. Not as far as I know.